Hi and welcome back to the channel. Well, if it's your first time here, my name's Andrew and I'd like to thank you for joining me. And if it's not your first time here, as I say in all the other videos, it's still Andrew, that hasn't changed. So today I'm going to be looking at a number of mistakes that new drone pilots make when they start flying their drones. Now it's going to apply to all the drones, whether or not it's DJI or Hover or any other make. We're all going to make the same mistakes when we are starting to learn how to fly. Now, it doesn't matter how long you've been flying, you're still going to make mistakes. I've been flying drones for 9 years, and even this week I went out and I made a stupid schoolboy error when I was making the video on hyperlapses and cruise control, and I'll talk about that later on in the video. So let's get started with mistakes and how you can avoid them. So the first one you want to look at is your pre-flight checks. So there's 4 things you need to do. You need to check that your batteries are fully charged, that your SD card is formatted and ready to use, that you've got a good GPS lock, and that your home point is updated. And I would say those 4 things are the most important, because without those it's going to ruin your full day of filming. Another thing you need to check is to make sure that you've got your settings for the video correct. Now, this happened to me the other day. I was doing the video on hyperlapsing, thinking that I was in 4K at 24 frames a second, got home only to find that I'd done the entire shoot in slow motion. So I ruined a full day's worth of filming because I didn't check the settings. So you need to just look at the bottom of your screen, and that's going to show you exactly what mode you're filming in. Local weather conditions are also going to be a big factor in your flying. If you're flying something like, say, the DJI Neo 1 or the Neo 2, that's going to perform significantly worse in high winds than something like, say, the Mavic 4 Pro. You also need to consider the direction of the wind. And this is because if you're flying the drone away from you and you've got a tailwind, so the wind is behind the drone, that's going to use significantly less power than when the drone is coming back to you and is facing a headwind, so you've got that extra resistance on the drone. So always bear in mind the direction of the wind, because you're going to need more power for the drone to come back to you if there is a strong gusty wind. And then along with environmental conditions, you need to consider the position of the sun. Now, if it's winter time as it is now and the sun is low and the drone is facing the sun and you're between the drone and the sun itself, the chances are you're going to be silhouetted. So you're not going to have any definition of yourself. You're just going to appear like a dark shadow in the middle of the footage. Now, obviously, this could be the type of shot that you're going for. For example, you could be up on a ridge, so you just want your outline to appear against a blue sky, and that could be nice. But the majority of the time, if you are silhouetted, then your footage is going to be useless. So if possible, you're always better off trying to get the sun behind the drone, so you're going to be well lit within your footage. Now, if you are shooting when there's long shadows, you could use these to your advantage. So you could do something like a rocket, so the drone's going up above you, and then the drone is concentrating on your shadow, which is obviously going to be quite large. So you could be on a bike, you would be very small, but the shadow of the bike would be very large. Or you could be with your partner and you've got some sort of romantic pose going on, and again, you'll just see the long shadow of you both, say, on a beach. So that could be quite nice. So that leads nicely on to exposure. Now, one of the mistakes you can make is getting your footage either overexposed or underexposed. And on the bottom of the screen, you can see a little EV value, and you want to try and get that down to minus 0.3 or minus 0.7. If it's in the plus range, that means your footage is going to be slightly overexposed. If it's in the lower range, it's going to be underexposed. But it's always easier to bring the shadows back into the footage than trying to get the highlights back, because once the highlights are gone and blown out, there's no recovering them. Now, another thing you need to do when it comes to exposure, if you're using a controller, and that's to lock your exposure settings. And this can be done under the button customization option in the settings of the controller itself. So it's just a matter of scrolling down to where you see button customization, going into that, and then assigning the auto lock either to your FN button, depending on what controller you're using. So when the drone is flying, just press the button, it's going to lock the exposure in, and you're not going to get any exposure changes as you're flying. But always remember as well is to expose for the brightest part of the image. So you don't want to expose for something which is dark and then come around into the sun, because the sun is going to blow out the highlights. So you're better off shooting for the lighter part and then having the drone come around to the darker part. And if necessary, you can always adjust the exposure, but 9 times out of 10, you won't need to. So the next tip is to have the histogram on the screen. And a lot of people are afraid of this when they start flying drones because they don't really know what it does. Now the histogram will give you a visual representation of the screen of your complete exposure level across the footage. And then to get your histogram on screen, you need to go into the settings by the three buttons on the top right, press the camera settings, and then scroll down to where it says histogram, and then just switch the icon on. And when your histogram is on the screen, you can also put your finger on it and move it to whatever part of the screen is more suitable for you. Now, what you need to do with this is you want to try and get the lines of the graph peeking towards the middle. If they're too far over to the right, then your image is going to be overexposed. If they're too far over to the left, your image is going to be underexposed. So you want to adjust that EV setting on the bottom, preferably to something, as I said earlier, to -0.3 or -0.7 to help get those lines on the histogram towards the center of the graph. And that's going to mean that your image is going to be well exposed. Now, another thing you need to consider when you're doing this is the position of the drone. So if you've got the drone high up looking down, so you've got less sky in the frame, it's also going to help with your exposure because you haven't got a large area of clouds or sky which can blow the image out. So try and get the drone higher looking down as opposed to down looking up. And that again is going to improve the exposure of your footage. Now, another big mistake that new pilots make is when they're filming themselves. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be doing the recording and they're going to have the controller in their hand, and that can spoil your footage as well. So if you are flying with a controller, what I suggest you do is get some sort of lanyard. So this means that you can put the controller around your neck or over your shoulder, and then you can tuck it away inside your coat, and that's not going to cause any issues with the controller being in sight. But one thing I would recommend if you are doing this is to get a sunscreen like I've got on here for the controller, because it means that you can cover the control sticks of the drone. So if you do tuck it away inside your coat, then the fabric of your coat is not going to be pressed against the sticks because these sticks are going to be covered, so you know that the drone is going to follow you along. So if you haven't got a cover or you're using a controller like the RCN3, just make sure that the controller's on the opposite side to the drone and it's out of sight. So that means it's not going to appear inside the footage. Or of course the other options you've got, if you've got someone with you, just get them to hold the controller or put the controller down somewhere safe if you're using one of the follow modes, so then you can do the tracking without the controller in view. Okay, this is the point where I stop for 2 minutes and say I'm not sponsored by DJI or any other drone manufacturers. So if you could do the like and subscribe and the notification bell, that would be great. Try and get me up to 3,000 subscribers by Christmas. I'd also like to give a shout out to one of my subscribers, which is Video from Razor 1265, who did a super for me on the channel as I was making this video. So thanks for that, that's greatly appreciated. If you'd like to do the same, that would also be greatly appreciated. And there's also a link below for Buy Me a Coffee. And any funds I get from the supers or Buy Me a Coffee is all going towards new drones, so I can help build the channel and give my honest opinion about the drones, hints, tips, that type of thing, without having to be tied in to any contractual agreements with DJI or any other manufacturers. So again, if you could do the like and subscribe thing, that would be great. You also need to make sure that you've got your return to home settings done correctly. So you need to set that to higher than the highest object in the area that you are. And you also want to set up the advanced return to home settings so that if you lose the signal, the drone is going to come back to you. So both of these are done on the controller. Make sure that you've got it, as I said, set to return to you, because if you've got it set to landing or hover, then the drone's not going to come back. It's just going to stay in that position, and it could be somewhere which isn't safe, for example over water or over a lot of trees, and it's going to stay there until the battery runs out, and then it's just going to land. So always make sure that your advanced return home settings are set to return. Now, the biggest mistake the new pilots make is being indecisive about the shot that they're trying to get. So it could be that you're out and you're filming, you've got a particular ruin or a subject matter, and you're going to go and you're filming with the drone going towards it. Then you think, oh, you're going to want to do a top-down shot. So you take the drone to the top. And then you decide that you're going to do an orbit. So you start to go around the subject. But then when you get back and you look at the footage, everything is just going to be a mishmash and you've got no real usable footage. So the best thing to do is one shot in one direction. So for example, if you are going to do a top-down shot, purely just do a top-down shot. Don't do anything else, just stick to doing the top-down shot. Then on the next shot, if you want to do a circle, just stick to doing a circle. And so on, if you want to do a droney, or you want to do a helix, or you want to do a tracking shot, just stick to that one shot and don't do anything else, and make sure that you just committed to doing that one shot. And then that's going to give you a lot more usable footage rather than trying to do all the shots in one move. And going along with that, film for longer than you think you need. So if you are doing a shot and you think, right, it's going to be 5 seconds, film for 10 or 15 seconds, because that's going to give you more flexibility when it comes to post-production, because it means then you can go in and you can trim the clip down to the size that you need. So always film for longer than you think you're going to need. And that leads us on to you spoiling the footage. So if you're in the frame, the viewer's eye is automatically going to be drawn to you. So if the subject is not you, then get out of the frame. Always make sure you're standing behind the drone or far enough away so you're not appearing within the footage itself. And if you can, do a practice flight first, just to make sure that you are out of frame. Because as I said, if you appear and you don't want to be, it's going to ruin your shot. Now, if you're using the controller to fly the drone, then you can use the screen to control the gimbal, but I would recommend that you don't do this. You're not going to get the same finesse using the screen as you will using the scroll wheel on the controller itself. So you can go into settings and change the speed that the gimbal is going to move. The higher the value, the faster the gimbal is going to move. The lower the value, the slower the gimbal is going to move. So you want to try and get a lower value, and then that's going to give you a nice slow panning effect when you are moving the gimbal. And that means your footage is going to be more cinematic because you haven't got any harsh, jerky movements. Now also when it comes to filming, do a variety of shots. Now I'm not talking about different locations or different subjects, I'm actually talking about the shots themselves. You could go somewhere and you've got a castle and a beach and some trees and some people, and you do a top-down shot for every single one. And people are going to get bored really quickly of doing that. So make sure you've got a variety of different shots. So you could do a top-down, a zoom out, a follow, an orbit, a helix, a boomerang, lots of different shots just to mix up your footage. Never concentrate on too many shots all of the same. And then of course you need to check your surroundings. So make sure that you've got enough room for the drone to fly to carry out the maneuver that you want it to do. And also make sure that you've got your obstacle avoidance settings set to what you want. Never have them switched off. Either have them on to bypass or brake depending on the circumstances and the environment that you're in. So this is going to save your time and battery time. The last thing you want to do is go out to a location, spend time doing the shot, only to realise that the drone's going to go halfway around and then stop because you hadn't taken into account a massive oak tree that's staring you right in the face. So always make sure that you've got enough availability for the drone to complete the manoeuvre that you're trying to get. Now sometimes it may be that you don't even notice the obstacles, and this happened to me a few days ago where I was down my local beach filming, and the beach is quite flat, and I was doing a 20-metre circle low to the ground. And because I started it on the lower side of the beach, as the drone came round to the other side where the ground had only risen by maybe a foot over the distance of 40 metres, the obstacle detection sensors kicked in and it stopped the shot. So that ruined it for that. So it meant I had to go back then, reposition the drone on the other side of the circle and then come back round, which wasted my time and battery life on the drone. So always bear in mind that even the smallest things can make a difference when it comes to getting the footage that you need. Now, if you're not planning on editing your footage into a little montage, then you need to make sure that the drone is moving when you start recording. Otherwise, you're going to have a few seconds of the drone standing still before it starts to move, and that's not going to be very interesting for the viewer. So always try and get the drone moving first, then hit the record button, and then, as I said, let it run for longer than you need, and then stop it. Don't start recording when the drone is in a fixed position unless you are going to edit the footage later on. If you've got something which is close to the drone, then you want to consider doing it in cine mode. So this means the drone is going to move very slowly past your subject, and it's going to give you a nice smooth cinematic effect. Whereas if you use cine mode and you're high up, you're not going to notice any difference. So you want to be in normal or maybe even sport mode if you've got the distance and you know the drone's not going to crash into anything. So the rule of thumb is, if you're a long distance away from the subject, the faster you can go. If you're close to something, the slower the better. So bear that in mind, that the settings you got on the controller are going to make a difference to how smooth your footage is going to look. And if you want to take it a step further, you can go into the export settings on the controller and you can adjust the speed parameters of each individual mode down to what you need. So you could slow the cine right down to the minimum, or you could speed up the sport to as fast as you want it to go, depending on the circumstances and the subject that you're filming. Now, the next two bits of information are possibly the most important of the entire video. And the first one is, good enough is good enough. So striving for perfection is never going to happen. You're doing the drone flying for fun. So you may watch lots of videos where they've got the perfect lighting conditions, as I said earlier, and they're shooting in D-Log-M, and they've color graded it, and they're doing this, that, and the other, and it looks brilliant. But do you really need that? I'll be honest with you, I very, very rarely shoot in D-Log-M. I normally just do all my settings in manual and let the drone take care of everything. I haven't got enough time to sit down and try and grade the footage to get the exact colour green that I want, or the exact colour of the blue sky. Good enough is good enough. And the next thing is, use the facilities of the drone. The drone's got some fantastic features, and there's no point in you trying to get the perfect orbit and then beating yourself up because you can't do it when you've got the feature built into the drone that's going to give you the results that you need first time. So don't be afraid to use the orbit or the droney or the rocket, the helix, whatever function you want to use, because that's what the drone is there for. As you get more experience with the drone, yes, you can go in and you can learn how to do all these different maneuvers if you want to do it for yourself, but the drone has the tools built in, so use the drone's tools. A lot of my best shots are done using the automated modes because I've taken the time first to work out exactly the shot I want, and then I just let the drone do its thing. So use the automated modes. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, another really versatile tool on the drone is cruise control. It's not set up initially when you get the drone. You need to go into the settings to get it up and running with the controller and the function buttons. And I've done a separate video on that, and I'll put that up here. So if you watch that, that's going to give you all the things you need to know about cruise control. Now, cruise control allows you to set the drone off in a particular direction at a particular speed. So this means that you're going to get some nice, smooth, cinematic footage without any harsh adjustments in speed or rotation, because you can set everything up, press the button, and it's going to go along that path at that speed. It really is a worthwhile tool to use when you are out filming. Now, adding music and sound effects to your video can also enhance your footage, but you need to bear in mind if you've got any copyright restrictions. You may have a particular song that you want to put over the top of it. You've done all your editing, you've included the song, you upload it to Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, whatever, and then it gets rejected because of the copyright issues. So what I would suggest is that you go to somewhere like the YouTube music library, and then from there you can get royalty-free music and put that over the top of your footage. I have used music from third parties, put them up onto things like Instagram, only to get a message maybe 6 months later to say that the composer's withdrawn the licensing agreement and then the video's been taken down. So now I just tend to use video and audio effects which are already on YouTube, because I'm not going to run into any issues. And then finally, the thing to avoid is going to be harsh rotational turns. So if you do go into normal or sport mode and you move the sticks left or right, the drone is going to move very quickly and it's just going to blur your footage. So when it comes to doing rotational turns, then you're better off going into cine mode and then just moving the sticks slightly to the left or the right, and that's going to give you a nice panning effect of your surroundings. Okay, that's that. Hopefully you will do the like and subscribe and the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. As I said, there's a link there for buy me a coffee, or if you want to do any supers, that'll be great too. If you've got any questions in relation to the DJI Neo 1, the Neo 2, the Mini 4 Pro, the Mini 5 Pro, or the Hover X1 Pro or Pro Max, also let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And if there's any other topics you want to see covered in relation to drones or action cams, then let me know in the comments below and I'll see what I can do in relation to those again. So thanks very much and I'll catch you again soon. Bye.